Today we are comparing the 2024 Toyota Highlander Platinum to the 2024 Subaru Ascent Touring. Both were refreshed just last year, so how well are they doing in this segment, and are they still amazing choices in 2024? That's what we're going to find out in today's video, so stay tuned to the end. As always, let's begin with the pricing and trim level. Starting with the Highlander, we have the top-end Platinum model, which is the nicest Highlander you can get. This costs around $52,000 and is nicely modded with quilted leather seats, heated and cooled front seats, and the latest Toyota technology. Moving on to the Subaru, we also have the nicest Ascent you can buy in 2024. Subaru will call this the Touring model, and it is nicely equipped with Nappa leather seats that are heated and cooled, and we also get 19 cup holders. Starting with the styling, both are going their own ways in this area, and Subaru is especially going for a more rugged look. We can definitely see this with the blacked out grille, the chrome strip that runs all the way across, and the functional vents that are located at the bottom. Now the Highlander is kind of going the opposite of the Ascent and kind of going for a more luxurious look. This has a mostly blacked out grille with chrome surrounding it everywhere, and these headlights look absolutely beautiful. Speaking of headlights, both will have mostly LED headlights with a projector-style headlamp. Neither of them will have fully LED headlights, and that is made true by the incandescent blinkers both will have. They also will include LED high beams and fog lights down below. When it comes to wheels, both are also going their own ways with these. They will be 20 inches on both, but the Subarus looks more off-road ready since these are also found on the Onyx edition. Moving on to the Toyotas, these are also more luxurious looking, as Toyota calls this a multi-spoke super chrome design. I can definitely see that in these wheels. Now let's move on to the side profile and see what we get here. Starting with the Ascent, we have chrome that runs along the top and bottom of the windows, and we also have the optional body side moldings which will keep this safe in the parking lot. This option is also available on the Highlander. Moving on to the Toyota, we also have chrome that runs along the bottom of the windows and running boards which I think are completely useless. The mirrors on both will be fully loaded with heating, blind spot monitoring, auto dimming, and power folding. Now let's move on to the back. On the Highlander, you get a chrome bumper protector, and you also get some more chrome at the bottom, which is exclusive to this Platinum model. You also get a chrome bumper protector on the Ascent, and chrome that runs in between the taillights, which I think looks absolutely amazing. Moving on to the taillights, these will be mostly incandescent in the same elements, however they are designed very differently. The Ascent kind of has a boomerang style like we saw in the front headlights, and the Highlander kind of has it spread out throughout the back. Now, I do feel like the Highlanders looks a little bit more premium, but that is my opinion, and it definitely isn't since they are both mostly incandescent. We have the top trim levels on both, so the interior is truly the best place to be. The Ascent's door panel will be made of soft touch material, open plywood trim, and 2-person memory seats, and a lot of leather on this upper portion. The switchgear will be located in the normal position. Now the storage down here is pretty abundant, but I would like Subaru to make some extra notice of the space right there. Moving on to the Highlander, we have faux wood, leather, all of your switchgear, 2-person memory seats, and a lot of storage. Moving on to the seats, Toyota is using a quilted design, however it is just normal leather, and you will get 10 ways of power adjusting. Now this does look more premium than the Ascent seats, however, the Subaru is using Nappa leather, which is more premium than the Highlander's normal leather, and you also get 12 ways of power adjusting and 2 ways of thigh extension, which the Highlander does not offer. Now that we're inside, both will have very nicely leather-wrapped steering wheels with heating, and they will both have manual adjusting. They will also have their heated steering wheel buttons stored in different locations. Moving on to the gauge cluster, Subaru is still holding on to their very outdated system. This has a very small 4-inch display in the center, and you have the 2 traditional analog gauges. Toyota already had a more premium setup before the refresh, but now they have upgraded the limited and platinum models to a full digital gauge cluster. The full customization is nice to have over the minimal customization on the Ascent, and I think Toyota did a great job upgrading their tech. Moving on to materials, both are offering some good materials for this price point. We have soft touch material, some weird aluminum, leatherettes, and some more wood trim that runs throughout the cabin on the Highlander. But you always know I saved the better for later, as the Ascent is the winner in this area. We have leather, soft touch material, white contrast stitching, aluminum all throughout, and very nice open pore wood trim which you do not get on the Highlander. Now let's move on to storage, as this is a very important area in a car like this. The center consoles open very easily, however the Highlanders will slide open, which is slightly easier than the hinge in the Ascent. Both will have very nicely sized center consoles with an extra storage tray and coin holders, and you also get 19 cup holders in the Ascent and a wireless phone charger in the Highlander. So I'll call it a draw for storage for now. This area is basically equal since they found storage areas in basically the same places, but I will give the Highlander a half point for having the wireless phone charger as standard equipment. When it comes to climate controls, they will be basically the same since they both have 3-zone automatic climate control, heated and cooled seats, and you also get a windshield de-icer. Now the Highlander is kind of different because you have full physical buttons, while the Ascent has some of the buttons in the screen. Moving on to the infotainment systems, both have the latest infotainment software from their brands. However, the Highlander has a horizontal display, while the Ascent has this interesting portrait style. Now, I don't know which one I like better, but I know that the Highlander's 12.3-inch display is bigger than the 11.6-inch one, and the Highlander's is way more intuitive. I feel like the Highlander's infotainment system is a lot smoother and a lot quicker than the Ascent's, but it really depends on which one you're used to because they both offer the same features. You get a very high resolution 360-degree backup camera, you get wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and you also get a Wi-Fi hotspot. So whichever one you prefer more, the horizontal display or the vertical display, it really is up to you because I am definitely more used to this horizontal display. I will not be awarding points for which one I am used to more, but I will be awarding the Highlander a point for having a larger display. Now looking up top, both will have digital rear view mirrors as standard equipment, it just depends on if you want to use it or not. And both will also have large panoramic sunroofs up top that go back to the second rows. Now let's move on to the second row, as this is a very important part of this car. This is where all your passengers will be seated, and it is very important that they're comfortable in a large family SUV. Starting with the door panel, we have a ton of cup holders everywhere, open pore wood trim, leather, a little grab handle, and you even get some sunshades, which is super nice. Now we also have tinted windows, and these seats are super comfortable. It's the same Napa leather with manual sliding and reclining, and you get a good amount of legroom back here. Now the video doesn't lie, the Ascent actually has more legroom than the Highlander. I don't have a proper clip of me sitting in the back of the Highlander at a good angle, but I can tell you that the Ascent has a little bit more room. Now let's move on to the Highlander, as this is also part of the comparison. The wood is not the same on the Highlander as I mentioned in the materials area, but the seats are pretty comfortable, just not as nice as the Ascent's Napa leather. Now getting in is pretty easy on both cars, and just take a look at that space difference. Taking a look at the amenities, both will have 3 stages of heated seats, a 3rd zone of climate control, 2 USB ports, and a household style outlet. Now let's take a look at those 3rd rows and see what we get back there. Let's start with the Highlander, since there have been a lot of things going around about the 3rd row of this car. Getting in is super easy, just pull one of 2 levers you can choose, and getting in, the access is actually kind of tight. Now this seat is slid to its normal position right in the middle, and as you can see, I do not have any legroom. Also, the thigh support is really bad as my knees are super high. You also will get some very bad lumbar support, 2 cup holders on each side, and a small window. I wouldn't say it's a good experience for anyone over 10 years old in the Highlander, but can the Ascent do better? Now let's move on to the Ascent. Third row access in this car is actually easier than the Highlander since the seat appears to be lighter and you get more room to crawl into the third row. Now actually in the third row, the seat is going to slide all the way back, but if it was in the normal position, I would have about 1 or 2 inches of legroom to spare. Now, my knees are actually lower in this car, and that is a good thing for taller people if you're planning on being back here for a while. As far as amenities go, I have 5 cup holders over 4, 2 USB ports over none, and some little extra storage space here and there. I can even option on third row sunshades if I really need them, and that is a big improvement over the Highlander. I'm going to give 2 points to the Ascent for having all of the features that it has, so we're just going to leave it at this. The Ascent has a way better third row than the Highlander. Now let's move on to the cargo area. Both of these cars are doing really well in this area since they're about in the middle of the class when it comes to dimensions. In the Highlander, you get 16.3 cubic feet with the third row up, 48.3 with the second row up, and 84.3 with the second row down. Neither of them will offer power folding seats, but you do get a cargo liner on the back of the third row seat on the Highlander as an option, but you do get more space underneath the floor in the Ascent. You also get a cubby on the Highlander. Now let's move our attention to the Ascent. Both will actually have hands-free power tailgates, which I realized I hadn't mentioned yet, but behind the third row of the Ascent, you get 17.8 cubic feet of cargo room, which is an upgrade from the Highlander. In addition, you will also get a cargo liner that lines the back of the third row seats. But if you fold down those third row seats, you're going to get less cargo room than the Highlander at 43.5 over 48.3. Now if you fold down all of the rows, you're going to get around 75.6 cubic feet in the Ascent, while the Highlander is at 84.3. Now there might have been a little miscalculation with the Ascent, but for now, the Highlander is going to get 1 point. Now let's move on to the powertrain and do our first ever driving comparison on this channel. Both cars are now using turbocharged 4-cylinder engines since the Toyota replaced the V6 with a 2.4-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. This puts out better figures than the Ascent at 265 horsepower and 310 pound-feet of torque. This is mated to an 8-speed automatic transmission, which I am absolutely sure all buyers will prefer over the CVT the Ascent has to offer. Moving on to the Ascent, we have the same old 2.4-liter Subaru Boxer 4-cylinder engine. This puts out 260 horsepower and 275 pound-feet of torque. This gets relatively good fuel economy at 20 in the city, 26 on the highway, and 23 combined. Those are almost identical figures as the Highlander, so no points will be awarded there. Now let's move on to the driving comparison, starting with the Ascent. Let's start things off in the Ascent with an acceleration test. Okay, so not bad for the Ascent. 260 horsepower is not a lot, but if I was looking at 260 on the window sticker, I wouldn't expect what I just experienced in front of me. The Ascent is not necessarily quick, but it's not as slow as you would think it would be. And the CVT is actually mimicking an 8-speed automatic transmission. Well, you still know it's a CVT, but it is a better experience. This is a very smooth car. The ride quality is amazing, and the seats are super comfortable, and that is very important to the driver. Now visibility in this car is great. You get some pretty big windows, and the headrests aren't really in the way, and as you can see right here, we could completely see around the garbage truck completely fine. Now the Ascent is a little bit wonky with the acceleration, because it has a very jumpy takeoff, and then it's not as jumpy anymore. So that is something that you will need to get used to when you're driving the car. I've read about it, I've seen videos about it, I even felt it myself sitting in the back seat here. So that is something to keep in mind. You have kind of a weird takeoff if you mash the gas pedal. Driving the Highlander, it feels like it is a little bit of a smaller car, and it is slightly, not by much, but it is noticeable. Now the Highlander is indeed a smaller car, but you don't get as good visibility because the windows aren't as big and the headrests are kind of in the way. Now both are very smooth. I feel like the Highlander does a great job with ride quality, and the wind noise is actually kept to a minimum in both cars, and I feel like they're both great for the driving experience. Now I'm not going to say which one is better because I didn't really feel that the other was better than the other, but it is a very nice driving experience in both cars. Now I do feel like the Highlander is a quicker car, it has stronger numbers, it is lighter, and it just is generally quicker off the line and stays fast, just like the acceleration test we are about to do. And you can hear we have a real 8-speed automatic under there. We don't have a fake CVT. So that is one nice thing about the Highlander. I won't be awarding any points for the driving experience because they're not necessarily better than the other, but they have their pluses and minuses, and I'm just going to keep it as a tie. Moving on to dimensions, we are looking at 197 inches in length for the Ascent, 194 for the Highlander, and we are looking at 78 inches for both on width. Well, there you have it. The Ascent is the winner, with a score of 5.5 to 4. The Highlander is still an amazing choice in 2024 with a new powertrain and a pretty luxurious interior, but the third row is just not that usable for long trips. If you want a Toyota and you want a third row that's usable, you might have to look at the Sequoia, the Sienna, or the Grand Highlander. The Ascent is also an amazing choice. You have a very usable third row, an amazing driving experience, and just a very rugged and durable design. Now, the Ascent is still not good in certain areas, like technology, where they haven't updated the gauge cluster, but if you look upon that, then the Ascent is an amazing choice for people shopping in this segment. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.